The propeller is the most exposed critical system on any surface warship. It is not protected by armor. It is not redundant in the way that radar arrays are redundant, or communication systems are redundant, or even propulsion plants are redundant on multi-shaft vessels. A propeller shaft, the mechanical connection between a warship's engines and its ability to move through water, is a single point of failure that sits below the waterline, turning at several hundred revolutions per minute, and is entirely vulnerable to any material that wraps around it with sufficient density and tensile strength to resist being shed. The U.S. Navy's surface warfare community has a specific operational term for the scenario in which a vessel's propeller becomes entangled with a foreign object and loses propulsion: fouled screw. The term is clinical. The operational consequences are not. A warship with a fouled screw is, at minimum, a warship that has stopped. A warship that has stopped in contested waters, surrounded by vessels whose intentions are not certain, at a distance from any support that makes rapid assistance impossible, is a warship in a fundamentally different tactical situation than the one it occupied 10 seconds before the propeller encountered the net. The Maritime Militia of the People's Republic of China understood this. They had understood it for long enough that the tactical use of fishing equipment, nets, lines, floats, the entire apparatus of a working fishery, as a tool for constraining the movement of opposing vessels, had been incorporated into the operational planning documents of maritime militia units operating in the South China Sea. Not formally, not in any document that had been produced for international review, but in the behavioral pattern of militia vessel operations around contested features: Mischief Reef, Fiery Cross Reef, Scarborough Shoal. The tactic had been documented often enough that the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet Intelligence Division had given it a specific threat category and had briefed it to every commanding officer deploying to the region. The commanding officer of the guided missile patrol ship knew the threat category. He had read the brief. He had discussed it with his executive officer during the transit south from Manila Bay. He had, at the time, considered it one of several threat scenarios that were plausible in the waters around Mischief Reef, and had assigned it a probability ranking that, in retrospect, he would revise upward. At 7:33 a.m., 3 nautical miles southwest of Mischief Reef's western entrance, the lookout on the port bridge wing reported something in the water ahead. Not a vessel, not a radar contact. Something in the water. A line of orange floats, spaced approximately 15 meters apart, running perpendicular to the patrol ship's current, heading on a line that extended from the left edge of the navigable channel to a point approximately 400 meters to the right. The floats were the surface markers of a monofilament fishing net, a net that had been placed at some point in the preceding hours directly across the most navigable portion of the channel approach southwest of Mischief Reef. All stop. The order came from the officer of the deck before the captain reached the bridge, which was exactly where the order should come from when the object in the water ahead is close enough to require an immediate propulsion response. The patrol ship's engines reduced to 0 thrust within 4 seconds, and the ship began coasting, 14 knots becoming 12, becoming 9, becoming 6, as the hull's momentum carried it forward, and the absence of thrust allowed the water resistance to slow the vessel. The line of orange floats was at 800 yards when the captain arrived on the bridge. Report. Fishing net across the channel, sir. Surface floats visible from approximately 800 yards to 1,200 yards on our current heading. No radar contact associated. Net appears to run from bearing 285 to bearing 105 across our track. Cannot confirm depth or extent below the surface. Cannot confirm depth or extent. That phrase carried the operational weight of the situation. A fishing net visible at the surface was a known obstacle. A fishing net whose subsurface geometry was unknown, whose depth, whose density, whose attachment points below the water were not visible from the bridge, was something different. It could be a single-layer net deployed at 3 meters depth, easily avoided by maintaining course and accepting the surface floats passing alongside. It could be a multi-layer net deployed from 0.5 meters to 12 meters depth, designed to catch not fish, but a propeller operating at 4 meters depth under a vessel's keel. Without an underwater survey, the difference was unknowable from the bridge. Speed was now 4 knots. The floats were at 600 yards. The patrol ship was still moving forward on residual momentum. All back emergency. The engines reversed. The patrol ship decelerated sharply, its hull structure transmitting the vibration of reversed propellers through every frame and fitting, and came to rest at 380 yards from the nearest visible float. 380 yards. The net was ahead. The channel was ahead. Mischief Reef's western approach, the navigable water that the freedom of navigation operation was specifically intended to transit, was ahead, past the net, and the net was across it. At 7:37 a.m., the radar picture updated. 3 surface contacts had been present on the patrol ship's radar since before the net was sighted. Identified during the approach as Maritime Militia fishing vessels, consistent with the pattern of militia operations around Mischief Reef that placed civilian-flagged boats in and around the approaches as a persistent presence. At 7:37 a.m., those 3 contacts began to move, not toward the patrol ship, away from their previous holding positions, relocating along the channel margins in a way that placed 1 contact to the northeast, 1 to the north, and 1 to the northwest of the patrol ship's current, stopped position. The geometry of the relocation was not random. The 3 contacts were positioning themselves to monitor the approaches to the channel from the positions most useful for observing any attempt to bypass the net, to port, to starboard, or to reverse and seek an alternate approach. They were not blocking. They were watching and recording. CPA, northeast contact CPA, 1,100 yards if we hold position. North contact CPA, 900 yards. Northwest contact, 1,400 yards. All 3 contacts now holding position. At 7:39 a.m., 2 additional contacts appeared at bearing 045 degrees, range 7.8 nautical miles, both classified as CCG Type 54 cutters, both on approach courses. CPA estimates approximately 3,200 yards in 14 minutes. The picture had developed its full geometry in 6 minutes. A net across the channel. 3 militia vessels positioned to observe bypass attempts. 2 CCG cutters inbound from the northeast to establish a presence before any response to the net could be completed. The sequence had been designed with a timeline. The net stops the patrol ship, the militia positions to record any maneuver, the CCG arrives before the patrol ship can resolve the net situation and complete its transit. Once the CCG was present at 3,200 yards, the geometry of any attempt to clear the net would be performed under Chinese Coast Guard observation and documentation, with the possibility of a CCG vessel positioning to interfere with any underwater clearance activity. The operational cost of the situation was specific. A fouled propeller on a patrol ship in this location, 3 nautical miles from Mischief Reef, 140 nautical miles from the nearest U.S. Navy support facility, with 2 CCG cutters arriving in 14 minutes, would place the vessel in a mission-degraded configuration in contested waters, not sunk, not disabled by kinetic action, simply unable to move under its own power, requiring towing assets that were hours away, in a location where Chinese administrative claims would be asserted over the vessel and its crew from the moment it was confirmed unable to maneuver. The political and legal consequences of that scenario were not calculable in advance. They were simply large. The trap had been built around that calculation. The first friction arrived at 7:41 a.m. from the patrol ship's own systems. The navigation chart for the western approach to Mischief Reef showed 2 potential bypass routes to the net. A northern passage, 340 yards wide at its narrowest point, between the net's northern terminus and a shoal area marked with a 4-meter depth contour, and a southern passage, wider at approximately 600 yards, between the net's southern terminus and the channel margin. The southern passage was the more viable option, wider, deeper, less constrained. But the electronic chart's depth data for the southern passage was sourced from a hydrographic survey conducted in 2011, 14 years prior, in waters where Chinese construction activity at Mischief Reef had deposited significant quantities of dredged material into the surrounding seafloor. The chart showed 9.2 meters minimum depth in the southern passage. The actual current minimum depth was unknown. Construction runoff and sediment displacement from the artificial island's development had altered the bathymetric profile of the surrounding waters in ways that post-2012 satellite imagery suggested, but that no updated hydrographic survey had confirmed. The chart said 9.2 meters. The actual depth might be 9.2 meters. It might be 6 meters. The patrol ship's draft was 4.1 meters, giving a keel clearance of 5.1 meters at the charted depth and approximately 1.9 meters at 6 meters depth. Proceeding through the southern passage on the basis of a 14-year-old chart in waters altered by construction activity, with 2 CCG cutters arriving in 12 minutes, was a navigation decision that the captain had to make with incomplete bathymetric data and a timeline that did not permit a bottom survey before the CCG geometry compressed the options available. He looked at the chart for 8 seconds. He looked at the radar display. He looked at the net floats 380 yards ahead. He made his decision. Prepare, RHIB, for deployment. I want a visual assessment of the net's depth and attachment configuration. Swimmers, if necessary. Time, 8 minutes. A rigid hull inflatable boat. the patrol ship's standard small craft could be in the water in 4 minutes and at the net in another 3. Its crew could visually assess the net's surface configuration, check for anchor lines indicating depth of deployment, and determine whether the net was a surface layer obstacle or a deep deployment obstacle before the CCG cutters arrived at 3,200 yards. CCG contacts, CPA revised, 2,800 yards, 11 minutes. At 7:44 a.m., the captain made his second decision simultaneously with the RHIB deployment. Seahawk, launch, flare on net floats, and southern bypass approach. I want a depth assessment on the southern passage based on watercolor and turbidity indicators. A helicopter's FLIR system was not a hydrographic survey tool, but watercolor and turbidity in shallow tropical waters provided a rough depth indicator that experienced pilots could read with sufficient accuracy for a go/no-go assessment. Water over shallow reef material under 4 meters appeared distinctly different in the South China Sea's near-infrared spectrum than water over deeper sand or reef at 8 to 10 meters. It was not precise. It was the information available in the time available. The Seahawk launched at 7:46 a.m. and was over the southern bypass approach at 7:48 a.m., its flare sweeping the water surface at 150 feet altitude. Seahawk reports southern passage watercolor consistent with depth greater than 6 meters. No reef coloration visible in the passage centerline. Caution, eastern margin showing shallow color signature at approximately 200 meters from the passage centerline. Recommend track along western half of passage for maximum depth clearance. Consistent with depth greater than 6 meters, not a guarantee. A professional assessment by a crew reading an infrared image from a helicopter. The captain registered it. He also registered the RHIB report that arrived 40 seconds later. The RHIB crew had reached the first float at 7:49 a.m. Their assessment, the net was a single-layer monofilament deployment at approximately 1 to 2 meters depth, attached to surface floats with no deep anchor lines visible on the accessible section of the net. No anchor lines meant the net was likely not deployed at propeller depth. Likely, not certain. CPA-CCG, 2,100 yards, 8 minutes. At 7:51 a.m., the second friction arrived from the chain of command. 7th Fleet Command had been monitoring the situation via satellite and encrypted communication circuit since 7:39 a.m. when the patrol ship's initial net obstruction report was transmitted. At 7:51 a.m., the circuit delivered a priority advisory. 7th Fleet Command was assessing whether the fishing net deployment constituted a deliberate interference with freedom of navigation under UNCLOS, and was consulting with Navy-sent legal staff on whether the patrol ship was authorized to physically clear the net as an obstruction to lawful transit. The advisory noted that any physical contact with fishing equipment claimed by Chinese nationals operating in waters China claimed as sovereign could be characterized by Beijing as destruction of civilian property, a framing that had been used in previous CCG-documented interactions in the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, and that had required subsequent diplomatic management. The advisory did not direct the captain to hold. It did not direct him to proceed. It advised him that the legal analysis was ongoing and that he should consider the framing implications of whatever action he took. The captain read the advisory once. He noted its arrival in the log. He continued his assessment. The RHIB was still at the net. Its crew had extended their examination to the northern section of the net's deployment and had found, at the northern terminus, something significant. The net was attached at its northern end to an anchor line that ran to a subsurface weight at approximately 8 meters depth. The northern terminus was anchored deep. The southern terminus, the section relevant to the southern bypass passage, was not similarly anchored. The net's southern end was held only by its surface floats. A surface float configuration without deep anchoring meant the net's southern end could be physically moved, pushed aside, by a vessel proceeding slowly through the passage without propeller engagement of the net material. The net was designed to be a deep obstacle on its northern end and a movable obstacle on its southern end. The southern bypass passage was not blocked by the net. The net's southern terminus would move out of the way if pushed. The passage was clear for a vessel that proceeded slowly with its propellers at minimum required thrust, with the net's southern end being physically held aside by the RHIB crew during the passage. CPA CCG 1,400 yards. 5 minutes. At 7:54 a.m., the captain issued his orders. RHIB crew, hold the net's southern terminus clear of the passage center line. Hold it until we're through. All engines ahead 1/3. Helmsman, course 045, southernmost track of the passage. Slow and steady. The patrol ship's engines engaged at minimum thrust, the propellers turning at the lowest RPM that would maintain steerage and slow forward progress. 2 knots, 3 knots. The hull began to move northeast toward the southern bypass passage. The RHIB crew positioned at the net's southern terminus, physically holding the monofilament aside. The Seahawk held its 150-foot altitude over the passage center line, its FLIR watching the seafloor directly ahead of the patrol ship's track. The pilot reported depth indicators in real time as the ship moved, consistent with greater than 7 meters on the center line, shifting to caution range at 150 meters to starboard. The helmsman held the western half of the passage, the patrol ship moving slowly through water that the 14-year-old chart showed at 9.2 meters and that the Seahawk's FLIR was indicating at greater than 7 meters, a 2.2 meter reduction from chart depth, a 2.9 meter clearance above the keel, enough. At 7:57 a.m., the patrol ship's bow entered the southern bypass passage. The 3 militia vessels were repositioning in real time, their radar returns moving to maintain observation angles on the patrol ship's transit through the passage. They were filming. Whatever recording equipment they carried was capturing the patrol ship proceeding slowly through the channel margin, the RHIB crew visible alongside holding the net, the Seahawk overhead. The footage existed. It would show a U.S. patrol ship passing through the bypass at 3 knots with a small boat crew holding a fishing net aside. It would not show the patrol ship stopped. It would not show the patrol ship reversing course. It would not show the patrol ship waiting for the CCG to arrive and conduct a media event around a motionless U.S. vessel in contested waters. It would show a ship that had assessed the obstacle, found the solution, and proceeded through the solution at 3 knots with a RHIB crew doing manual labor on a monofilament net. CCG contacts, CPA, 800 yards, contact speed reducing. The CCG cutters had arrived at 800 yards and were decelerating. They had not arrived in time to position inside the passage before the patrol ship entered it. They were now at 800 yards, watching a U.S. vessel in the final stage of transiting the passage. They had been dispatched to complicate. At 8:01 a.m., the patrol ship cleared the northern end of the bypass passage and resumed the channel track toward Mischief Reef's western approach. All ahead standard. Resume transit speed. RHIB. Recover. The small boat crew released the net's southern terminus, and the monofilament floats drifted back to their original position across the channel. The net remained deployed. It had not been cut. It had not been removed. It had been moved, briefly, by 4 sailors in an inflatable boat, and then returned to its position. The Chinese nationals who owned it, or claimed to own it, would find it intact. CPA CCG cutters, 600 yards and opening, both contacts holding position. The CCG cutters did not pursue. They held position at the entrance to the bypass passage, their cameras recording a patrol ship that was now past them and continuing its transit, a patrol ship that had been stopped for 28 minutes by a fishing net and had responded by deploying a helicopter, launching a small boat crew, physically assessing the obstacle, identifying a solution, and proceeding through the solution without damaging the fishing equipment and without waiting for permission from any Chinese administrative authority to transit waters that international law said required no such permission. The helmsman had been at the wheel through the entire sequence, from the all-stop at 7:33 a.m. through the slow passage at 3 knots at 7:57 a.m. and the return to transit speed at 8:01 a.m. 28 minutes. The passage through the bypass approach had required his most careful work. 3 knots on a specific track in the western half of a narrow passage in a cross swell that was pushing the hull 1 to 2 degrees off course every 8 seconds. With a RHIB crew alongside that, he could not allow the hull to approach within 20 yards of. With a Seahawk calling depth changes in real time overhead. Precise work. The kind of work that fills the hands completely and leaves no attention available for anything except the task. When the patrol ship cleared the passage and resumed standard transit speed, the helmsman's hands relaxed on the wheel by a margin that was not visible from across the bridge, but was felt in the palms, the release of a grip held at a specific tension for 28 minutes. He did not look at his hands. He adjusted his grip to the new speed setting and held the new course. The RHIB crew was recovered at 8:06 a.m. They came aboard wet. The combination of South China sea spray and the work of holding a monofilament net in position against a cross-swell current had soaked their uniforms. They debriefed in 2 minutes and went below. One of them, the crew chief, stopped at the bridge passageway and looked through the open bridge wing door at the Mischief Reef feature now visible on the horizon. The artificial islands, structures distinct against the tropical sky, the South China Sea extending blue and flat in every direction around it. He looked at it for 4 seconds. Then he continued below. At 8:15 a.m., the Freedom of Navigation operation passed the western entrance marker of Mischief Reef's approach zone. Transit on track. No systems damage. No personnel injuries. The net was behind them, still deployed across the channel, its orange floats bobbing in the modest swell. The situation report to 7th Fleet Command was transmitted at 8:20 a.m. It described the net deployment, the RHIB assessment, the Seahawk depth analysis, the southern bypass solution, the CCG cutter's arrival and holding position, and the completion of the transit on the assigned track. 3 paragraphs. It noted specifically that the fishing net had not been cut or damaged, and that the patrol ship's propellers had not made contact with any net material at any point during the transit. 3 militia vessels, 2 CCG cutters, 1 monofilament fishing net across the channel approach. 28 minutes from net detection to passage clearance. 380 yards, closest approach to the net before the patrol ship stopped. 600 yards, closest approach by CCG cutters before holding position. 0 contact between any propeller and any net material. 0 systems damage. 0 assistance from any shore-based authority requested or received. The net required the patrol ship to stop and wait. The patrol ship assessed the obstacle, found the margin, and went through it. That was the entirety of the response. That, in the South China Sea, was sufficient.